Hi guys. Alex and Mia had built a seemingly ideal life together. After 15 years of marriage, their relationship seemed unshakable, centered around their two daughters, Emily and Sophie, and a bond forged by years of shared dreams and struggles. Life was harmonious until Mia's new job with Henry, a charismatic and influential politician, began to pull her away from the family. The first signs were subtle, easy to dismiss. She started working late. Her phone buzzed incessantly with messages, and she often spoke about Henry with admiration. "He's so passionate about his work," she would say, her eyes lighting up in a way Alex hadn't seen in years. At first, Alex was proud of Mia's success. She had worked hard to get this job, and he supported her completely. But soon, small cracks began to appear in their routine. Dinner as a family became a rare occurrence. Mia missed Emily's dance recital, citing an urgent meeting. Sophie's soccer match was overshadowed by a last-minute conference call. Alex found himself managing the household alone, from cooking meals to helping with homework, while Mia's absence grew more pronounced. One night, Alex noticed a change in Mia's demeanor. She was distracted, her laughter forced, her gaze distant. He dismissed it as work stress but couldn't ignore the growing distance between them. When he tried to talk to her about it, Mia brushed off his concerns. "You're overthinking, Alex. It's just work." But it wasn't just work. Mia's phone became a constant source of distraction. She guarded it fiercely, taking it with her even to the bathroom. Alex stumbled across moments where her smile, while reading a text, didn't feel like it was meant for him. Then came the night she didn't come home until after midnight. She claimed she was at a late event for work, yet her explanation was thin. Her perfume lingered stronger than usual, and Alex couldn't help but wonder if she had reapplied it at some point. Questions churned in his mind, but he kept them to himself, hoping the doubts would fade. As weeks turned into months, Alex noticed more troubling changes. Mia was dressing differently, sleeker outfits, higher heels, and a wardrobe that seemed to exude confidence and allure. Henry's name came up more frequently in her conversations, and she often compared his drive and ambition to Alex's more reserved nature. "You should meet Henry, Alex," she said one evening. "You'd admire his vision. He's doing incredible things for the community." Alex tried to hide his discomfort. "Maybe someday," he replied, though the idea of meeting the man who now seemed to monopolize Mia's thoughts filled him with unease. Mia began spending weekends at work retreats, claiming they were vital for her career. Alex tried to support her but couldn't ignore the gut-wrenching suspicion that something wasn't right. He confided in his best friend, Mark, who urged him to confront her. "You deserve answers," Mark said. "You can't let this fester." One evening, after tucking the girls into bed, Alex decided to address the growing rift. "Mia, we need to talk. I feel like we're drifting apart, and I don't know how to fix it." Mia sighed heavily, avoiding his gaze. "Alex, I'm under a lot of pressure at work. Henry expects a lot from me, and I need you to understand that." "I do understand," Alex said, his voice trembling. "But it feels like Henry is more important to you than we are." Her silence was deafening. The tipping point came when Alex found a receipt for a hotel stay in her purse. The date matched one of her supposed work retreats. His heart raced as he confronted her that evening. "Mia, I found this." He held up the receipt. "Care to explain?" Mia's face paled. She stammered, "It's not what you think. I needed a break. Work has been overwhelming." "With Henry?" Alex's voice cracked. "You expect me to believe this is just about work?" Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't deny it. "Alex, I don't know what to say." The air between them grew heavy, suffocating. Alex felt as if the foundation of his life was crumbling beneath him. For the sake of their daughters, he decided to keep the confrontation private, but the trust that once bound them felt irreparably shattered. In the days that followed, Alex noticed more changes. Mia was often on edge, her temper short. He began checking her phone when she wasn't looking, something he had never done before. The messages between her and Henry confirmed his worst fears. They were flirtatious, filled with inside jokes and late-night exchanges that no married woman should have with another man. One evening, as Mia prepared for yet another late meeting, Alex stood in the doorway, blocking her path. "You're not going," he said firmly. "Alex, don't be ridiculous." "This is my job," she retorted. "Your job is destroying our family," he shot back. "Can't you see what this is doing to us?" Mia hesitated, guilt flickering across her face, but she brushed past him and left. Alex stood there, feeling powerless as the door slammed shut. The turning point came when Emily, their eldest daughter, asked, "Daddy, why is Mommy always working? Doesn't she love us anymore?" Her innocent question broke Alex's heart. He realized he couldn't shield his daughters from the strain forever. Something had to change. The once happy home Alex and Mia had built was now a battleground of suspicion, unspoken accusations, and heartbreak. Each day brought new revelations and deeper wounds. The family's future hung in the balance, and Alex was left grappling with whether their love could survive the storm, or if it was already too late. Mia's transformation didn't happen overnight, but once I started noticing it, I couldn't unsee it. At first, I chalked it up to the demands of her new job. She'd landed a high-profile position with Henry, a prominent local politician whose charisma could light up a room. Mia seemed excited about the opportunity, and I was genuinely happy for her. She had worked hard to get there, and I wanted to be the supportive husband. But as weeks turned into months, her dedication to her work started to overshadow everything else. It began with her constant busyness. Mia had always been meticulous and hardworking, but now her schedule seemed to border on obsessive. She'd leave early, come home late, and when she was home, she was glued to her phone or laptop. Even on weekends, she would find reasons to be unavailable, urgent reports, strategy meetings, or the ever-present "Henry needs my input." It was as if her job had swallowed her whole, leaving little room for anything or anyone else. The detachment was harder to define but impossible to ignore. Conversations between us became shallow, reduced to logistics about the girls or polite exchanges about our day. The warmth that used to fill our home had given way to an uncomfortable distance. It wasn't just me who felt it. Emily, our oldest, started asking why Mommy wasn't around as much anymore. Sophie, our youngest, began acting out in small ways, clinging to me at bedtime or refusing to eat her dinner without Mia at the table. And then there was Henry. His name came up so often that it felt like he was a third person in our marriage. Mia spoke about him with an admiration that felt excessive. "Henry's vision is just incredible," she'd say during dinner, her eyes lighting up. "You should hear him talk about the future. It's inspiring." I wanted to believe it was just admiration, but her tone made me uneasy. It was the way she talked about him, the way she seemed to glow when she mentioned his name. I started to feel like I was competing with a man I'd never met, a man who already seemed to command so much of her attention. The first real crack appeared one Friday night. Mia had promised to be home for dinner, something that had become rare. I'd made her favorite, spaghetti carbonara, and set the table with candles, hoping to recapture a bit of the closeness we used to share. But when 7 p.m. rolled around, there was no sign of her. She finally walked in at nearly 9, offering a rushed apology about a last-minute meeting with Henry. "You could have called," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "The girls were waiting for you." She brushed past me, dropping her bag on the counter. "I'm sorry, Alex. It was important. You know how it is." But I didn't know how it was. Not anymore. The woman who used to prioritize family dinners and bedtime stories now seemed like a stranger, someone whose life I no longer recognized. The following week, I started noticing her phone habits. She was always on it, texting or checking her emails, and she kept it close, closer than she ever had before. At night, she used to leave it on the nightstand, but now it was either tucked under her pillow or carried into the bathroom. Once, when her phone buzzed during dinner and she quickly snatched it up, I caught a glimpse of the screen. It was a message from Henry. "What's so urgent that Henry has to text you during dinner?" I asked, my tone sharper than I intended. Mia looked up, startled. "It's work, Alex. Don't make it a big deal." But it was a big deal. I couldn't shake the feeling that their relationship wasn't just professional. The way she smiled at her phone, the way she defended him so vehemently, it all felt wrong. My suspicions deepened after I noticed a shift in her appearance. Mia had always been beautiful, but now she was putting extra effort into her looks, sleeker outfits, perfect makeup, a new perfume I didn't recognize. When I mentioned it, she dismissed it casually. "I'm just trying to look professional," she said, but it felt like there was more to it than that. One evening, while she was in the shower, her phone buzzed on the counter. I don't know what came over me, but I picked it up. It was locked, of course, but the notification on the screen was from Henry, "Looking forward to tomorrow," winky face. I set the phone down as if it had burned me, my mind racing. What was happening tomorrow? Why did he send a winking emoji? The doubt gnawed at me, but I couldn't bring myself to confront her, not yet. I needed more than a gut feeling. Over the next few days, I started paying closer attention. Mia was vague about her plans, often saying she had meetings or site visits without elaborating. One Saturday, she claimed she needed to go into the office for a few hours. Something about her tone didn't sit right with me, so I decided to drive by her office later that afternoon. Her car wasn't there. That night, I couldn't hold it in any longer. As we lay in bed, the tension between us thick enough to cut with a knife, I turned to her. "Mia, are you happy?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She looked at me, startled. "What kind of question is that?" "I don't know," I said. "You've just been different lately." "Distant?" She sighed, turning away. "I'm just tired, Alex. Work is exhausting." But it wasn't just exhaustion. I could feel it in my bones. Something was wrong. The moment I discovered the truth was like being punched in the stomach. I wasn't even looking for confirmation that night. In a way, I hoped my suspicions were unfounded, that I was being paranoid. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. It happened late one evening when Mia left her phone unattended on the kitchen counter. She was upstairs putting Sophie to bed, and Emily was already asleep. The house was quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. Her phone buzzed with a message, and my eyes instinctively darted to the screen. It was Henry. I hesitated. Every part of me told me to walk away, to respect her privacy, to trust her. But the past few months had worn me down. I couldn't keep living with the doubt, the unease. My hands trembled as I picked up her phone. It was locked, but I had seen her input the code countless times over the years. My fingers moved on autopilot. The message was brief. "Tonight was amazing. I can't wait to see you again." My heart pounded as I stared at the words. There was no mistaking the tone, the intimacy. It felt like a betrayal etched into my chest. I scrolled up, my stomach sinking deeper with each passing line. The thread was filled with messages I could barely bring myself to read. Flirtatious banter, inside jokes, and worse, details of meetings and moments I had no knowledge of. There were messages about lunches, late-night drinks, even trips I thought were work-related. My fingers clenched the phone so tightly I thought I might crush it. "You're the only person who understands me," one message from her read. "You make me feel alive," Henry had replied. The evidence was irrefutable. My wife, the woman I had shared my life with for 15 years, the mother of my children, was having an affair. I felt my breath hitch as tears blurred my vision. How could she? How could Mia, the woman I thought I knew better than anyone, do this to me? To us? To our family? I knew I couldn't stop there. My anger and grief drove me to dig deeper, to know everything. Her photos were next. I opened the app with a mix of dread and fury. Most of the images were innocent. Pictures of Emily and Sophie, selfies, snapshots of our life. But tucked between them were photos of her with Henry. Some were professional, taken during events or work trips. But others were different. They were casual, candid, intimate. A picture of them at a restaurant, her hand resting lightly on his arm. A selfie of the two of them in what looked like a hotel room. My chest tightened as I scrolled further. One image stood out, a shot of her reflection in a mirror, dressed in lingerie I had never seen before. The caption underneath read, "For later winky face. Asterisk, it wasn't meant for me." I put the phone down, my hands shaking. My thoughts were a tangled mess of disbelief, rage, and sorrow. I had suspected something was wrong, but to see it laid out so plainly was unbearable. The sound of Mia's footsteps descending the stairs snapped me out of my daze. I scrambled to place the phone back on the counter, my heart racing. She entered the kitchen, her face soft with exhaustion. "What are you doing up?" she asked, her voice casual. I couldn't bring myself to answer. My eyes locked onto hers, searching for something, remorse, guilt, anything that could explain what I'd just uncovered. But she looked at me with the same calm expression she always wore, completely unaware of the storm raging inside me. "Alex," she pressed, tilting her head. "Is everything okay?" "No," I said, my voice trembling. "No, it's not." Her brow furrowed. "What's wrong?" I wanted to scream at her, to demand answers, to show her the messages and photos. But the words caught in my throat. I wasn't ready. Not yet. I needed time to process, to figure out what to do next. "I'm just tired," I lied, turning away. "It's been a long day." She gave me a long, searching look before nodding slowly. "All right, I'm heading to bed." I listened as her footsteps faded up the stairs, each step pounding in my ears like a drum. When I was certain she was gone, I slumped against the counter, burying my face in my hands. I wanted to cry, to break something, to do anything that could release the pain threatening to consume me. But I couldn't. The girls were upstairs, and they couldn't know. Not yet. That night I barely slept. My mind replayed every moment from the past few months, every late night, every excuse, every mention of Henry. It all made sense now. The signs had been there all along, but I had been too blind, or too trusting, to see them. The next morning, I couldn't even look at Mia. She acted as if nothing was wrong, smiling at the girls over breakfast, kissing me lightly on the cheek before heading out the door. I wondered if she felt any guilt at all, or if she had convinced herself that her actions were justified. I spent the day in a haze, torn between confronting her immediately and holding back for the sake of our daughters. Emily and Sophie deserved better than to be caught in the crossfire of their parents' broken marriage. But how could I pretend everything was fine when my world had just been turned upside down? By the time Mia came home that evening, I had made up my mind. I needed answers. I needed her to tell me why. Why she had done this. Why Henry. Why she thought she could betray me and still come home to the life we had built together. But as I looked at her, at the woman I had loved for so many years, I felt a pang of hesitation. I knew that once I confronted her, there would be no going back. Our lives would change forever, and there was no guarantee they would change for the better. The decision to gather evidence wasn't one I made lightly. It wasn't about revenge at first, it was about clarity, about making sure I wasn't insane. But the deeper I went, the more my anger hardened into something sharper, something darker. Mia had ripped apart our family without a second thought, and I couldn't let her walk away unscathed. The morning after I uncovered the affair, I felt like I was living with a stranger. She laughed with the girls, kissed them on the forehead before school, and waved me off with a distracted, "Have a good day." It was as if nothing had happened. But I knew. And now, I needed to make sure no one could ever doubt it. The first step was getting access to her phone without her knowing. She rarely let it out of her sight, but I noticed that during her evening showers, she left it charging in the bathroom. That night, as the water ran upstairs, I took the opportunity. I had already seen her code, so unlocking it was simple. My hands were trembling as I navigated her messages, scrolling through the thread with Henry. Each word was like a dagger, their casual intimacy sickening. I quickly took screenshots of everything. Their plans, their inside jokes, the selfies she'd sent him. I even found messages where they mocked me. "Alex has no clue," one of them read, followed by a string of laughing emojis from Henry. Another, "It's sad really. He thinks I'm just working late." My chest tightened as I read those words, but I forced myself to keep going. I needed it all. I uploaded the screenshots to a secure folder on my laptop and made sure to delete any traces of my snooping. The next step was harder. I needed to record their conversations, which meant finding a way to intercept her calls. I spent hours researching, finally settling on a voice recording app that would log her calls without alerting her. Installing it on her phone was risky, but by the time I was done, it was in place. Over the next week, I felt like a spy in my own home. Every time her phone rang, my heart raced. I'd wait until she was out of the house to check the recordings, listening to her and Henry's conversations with a mixture of dread and fury. Their voices were so casual, so comfortable with each other. They talked about everything, work, their secret meetings, even me. "You sure he doesn't suspect anything?" Henry asked in one call. Mia laughed softly. "Alex? Please. He's too preoccupied with the girls to notice. He trusts me." Her confidence made me sick. I saved every recording, labeling them carefully. With each piece of evidence I collected, I felt a twisted sense of satisfaction. If Mia wanted to destroy our family, she'd have to face the consequences. But gathering evidence wasn't enough. I needed a plan. Mia was clever, and if I confronted her without proof, she'd likely manipulate the situation, twist the narrative to paint herself as the victim. I couldn't let that happen, not to me, and definitely not to Emily and Sophie. They deserved the truth. I started documenting everything, her late nights, her vague excuses, her time spent on the phone. I kept a journal, detailing every suspicious behavior, every inconsistency. I even installed a small camera in the living room, where she often took her calls. It felt invasive, wrong even, but I couldn't shake the image of her laughing at me behind my back. I had to know the full extent of her betrayal. One night, while reviewing the footage, I caught her pacing the living room, phone pressed to her ear. "I can't wait to see you again," she said, her voice low and intimate. "The girls are at their grandparents' this weekend. We'll have the house to ourselves." I clenched my fists, my mind spinning. She was planning to bring him here, to the home we'd built together, the home our daughters grew up in. The audacity of it was unbearable. But it also gave me an opportunity. Over the next few days, I prepared for what felt like a battle. I updated the camera's settings to ensure I'd capture everything and installed another one in our bedroom. If she thought she could carry on her affair under our roof, she was sorely mistaken. I also reached out to a lawyer, careful to keep it discreet. I explained the situation, laying out what I'd discovered and what I planned to do. The lawyer was sympathetic but warned me to proceed cautiously. "If you want to protect your daughters, you need to think about how this will affect them," she said. "Revenge might feel good in the moment, but you don't want to escalate things to the point where they're caught in the crossfire." Her words stuck with me, but they didn't deter me. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about justice. Mia had shattered my trust, our marriage, our family. She needed to be held accountable. I started preparing an email, drafting it over and over until the words felt just right. It included screenshots of the messages, audio clips of their calls, and footage from the cameras. My plan was to send it to Henry's wife, a woman I'd only seen in pictures but who deserved to know the truth. I also intended to keep a copy for myself, just in case Mia tried to deny anything. Despite my anger, a small part of me still hoped she'd come clean, that she'd admit her mistakes and beg for forgiveness. But as the days passed and her behavior remained the same, that hope faded. She didn't care about me, about us. Her only concern was keeping her secret safe. The weekend arrived, and as expected, Mia told me she had to work late. The girls were at my parents' house, so it was just the two of us. I pretended to believe her, acting as if nothing was wrong, even as my stomach churned with anticipation. That night, as I sat alone in the darkened living room, waiting for her to return, I knew there was no turning back. Whatever happened next would change our lives forever. The idea to expose Mia and Henry publicly came to me in a moment of cold clarity. They hadn't just betrayed me, they'd built their deceit in plain view, counting on my trust and ignorance to keep their affair hidden. That wasn't something I could let slide. If they wanted to carry on their secret under the spotlight of their professional lives, then the spotlight would become their undoing. It just so happened that Mia had been gushing about an upcoming gala. Hosted by Henry's office, it was a fundraising event with important donors, media coverage, and high-profile attendees. Mia had spent weeks planning for it, choosing the perfect dress, practicing her speech, and ensuring every detail would reflect positively on Henry's campaign. "This is going to be huge for him," she said one evening, her eyes glowing. "We're expecting national media attention." I nodded, feigning interest, while silently deciding that the gala would be the stage for my retaliation. They had chosen to humiliate me by turning my marriage into a farce. It was only fitting that their comeuppance happened in front of an audience as well. In the days leading up to the event, I finalized my plan. I had more than enough evidence, screenshots of their texts, photos, and the damning recordings of their intimate conversations. But the centerpiece of my strategy was a particularly incriminating recording where Mia and Henry openly discussed their relationship, laughing about how they'd fooled everyone, including me. "You really think he suspects anything?" Henry asked. "Alex?" Mia replied with a laugh. "Please. He couldn't see what's right in front of him if it slapped him in the face." That recording played over and over in my mind, fueling my determination. The night of the gala arrived. Mia looked stunning in a deep blue gown, her hair styled in loose waves. She was radiant, the picture of confidence, and for a moment, I almost faltered. I had loved this woman for so many years, part of me still did. But then I remembered her betrayal, the lies, and the texts mocking me. I clenched my jaw, steeling myself for what was to come. "You'll be okay here tonight?" Mia asked as she grabbed her clutch. "Of course," I replied smoothly. "Go enjoy yourself." I waited an hour before heading to the venue. The gala was held at an upscale hotel downtown, its grand ballroom filled with glittering chandeliers and well-dressed attendees sipping champagne. I slipped inside unnoticed, mingling just enough to blend in. The event was everything Mia had promised: polished, elegant, and bustling with influential figures. I spotted her almost immediately. She stood near the stage, laughing with Henry and a cluster of guests. They looked so composed, so untouchable. It made my blood boil, but I stayed calm. This wasn't the time for emotion. When the speeches began, I positioned myself near the audiovisual booth. The technician was busy adjusting microphones, and I used the distraction to slip a USB drive into the sound system's console. I had rehearsed this moment in my mind 100 times, timing it perfectly with Mia's speech. She took the stage, her confidence radiating. "Thank you all for being here tonight," she began, her voice steady and warm. "Your support means everything to us, and together, we're building a brighter future." The audience applauded, their admiration clear. I waited until she reached the height of her speech, her words flowing effortlessly before I gave the signal. A quick nod to the technician, who was oblivious to what I had queued up. Her voice abruptly cut off, replaced by the recording. Henry's voice filled the room, loud and unmistakable. "You really think he suspects anything?" The room fell silent, the guests exchanging confused glances. Mia froze on stage, her smile faltering as her own voice responded. "Alex? Please." He couldn't see what's right in front of him if it slapped him in the face. The audio continued, each word landing like a blow. Gasps rippled through the crowd as the recording revealed the extent of their affair. The secret meetings, the lies, the laughter at my expense. Mia's face turned ashen, her composure crumbling as the weight of the exposure hit her. Henry, standing near the stage, looked equally panicked. He tried to signal the AV technician to stop the playback, but it was too late. The damage was done. Every word had been heard, every ugly detail laid bare. Murmurs spread through the crowd, growing louder with each passing second. Someone shouted, "Disgraceful!" Others pulled out their phones, capturing the scene in real time. Mia stammered, "I don't know what this is," but her voice was drowned out by the uproar. Henry stepped forward, attempting to salvage the situation. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is clearly some kind of misunderstanding," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. The recording had left no room for doubt. I stood near the back, watching as the chaos unfolded. Mia's world, the carefully constructed image she had built, was crumbling before her eyes. I didn't feel triumph, just a hollow sense of vindication. She had destroyed our family, and now, the facade she had created with Henry was being torn down for everyone to see. Security eventually cut the audio, but the damage was irreversible. The gala ended abruptly, guests departing with looks of disgust and disbelief. Mia and Henry disappeared into the chaos, their reputations shattered. When I returned home that night, the house was silent. Mia wasn't back yet, and I wasn't sure if she ever would be. I sat alone in the living room, staring at the family photos on the wall. The satisfaction I thought I'd feel was absent. All that remained was an aching emptiness and the knowledge that, while I had exposed the truth, the cost of that truth was immeasurable. Emily and Sophie would wake up in the morning, unaware of what had transpired. Their lives were about to change forever, and I had no idea how to shield them from the fallout. But one thing was certain, the lies were over. There would be no more pretending. The days after the gala were a blur. Mia didn't come home that night, and part of me was relieved. The girls were still at my parents' house, shielded from the chaos for the time being. I sat in the quiet house, staring at the wall as the weight of everything settled on me. The satisfaction of exposing Mia and Henry publicly was fleeting. Now came the aftermath, a messy, painful process I couldn't avoid. The next morning, I called a divorce attorney. There was no hesitation, no second-guessing. Our marriage had been destroyed the moment Mia chose her affair over her family. I explained the situation to the lawyer, detailing the evidence I had collected and the events of the gala. He assured me that with the amount of proof I had, gaining custody of Emily and Sophie would likely be straightforward. Mia finally came home 2 days later. She looked disheveled, her face pale, her usual confidence replaced with exhaustion. I was sitting at the kitchen table when she walked in. She hesitated in the doorway, her eyes darting to the packed suitcase I had placed by the door. "Alex, we need to talk," she began, her voice trembling. "There's nothing to talk about," I said, my tone flat. "It's over, Mia. I've filed for divorce." She flinched as if I had slapped her. "Alex, please. Let me explain." "Explain what?" I cut her off, standing up. "How you betrayed me. How you lied to my face for months. How you laughed at me behind my back. There's nothing you can say that I don't already know." Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't let it soften me. I had spent too long being blind to her deceit. Now, I had to focus on protecting myself and our daughters. "I'm staying with Henry," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "For now." I laughed bitterly. "Good. You can see how far that relationship gets you now that the world knows what kind of man he is. Do you honestly think he'll risk his career for you? He was panicking just as much as you were at the gala." Mia didn't respond. She just stared at me, her face a mix of anger and despair. Eventually, she grabbed her suitcase and left without another word. The divorce proceedings moved quickly, thanks to the overwhelming evidence I had gathered. Mia's affair left her with little ground to fight on, and her lawyer's attempts to negotiate were half-hearted at best. When it came to custody of Emily and Sophie, the decision was clear. The court awarded me full custody, citing Mia's unstable personal situation and the impact her actions had on the family. Telling the girls was the hardest part. Emily, being older, understood more than I wanted her to. She had overheard enough conversations to piece together what was happening. One evening, as I tucked her into bed, she looked at me with tears in her eyes. "Daddy, is Mommy leaving because of us?" she asked, her voice quivering. I felt my heart shatter. "No, sweetheart," I said, pulling her into a hug. "This isn't your fault. It's not you or Sophie. It's between Mommy and me. But I promise you, I'll always be here for you." Sophie, being younger, didn't grasp the full scope of the situation. She just knew that Mommy wasn't home anymore. She asked about Mia constantly at first, her innocent questions cutting through me like a knife. I did my best to keep things as normal as possible for them, but the changes were unavoidable. Mia tried to see the girls at first, but her efforts were inconsistent. She'd show up late for scheduled visits or cancel at the last minute, leaving Emily and Sophie disappointed and confused. The more she pulled away, the harder it became for them to maintain a connection with her. Meanwhile, Mia's career was in freefall. The scandal from the gala had made headlines, and her involvement with Henry was public knowledge. She was forced to resign from her job, and her professional reputation was in ruins. Henry didn't fare much better. His donors began pulling their support, and rumors circulated that his political career was all but over. I heard through mutual acquaintances that Mia and Henry's relationship didn't last long. Without the secrecy and excitement of their affair, their bond quickly crumbled under the pressure of public scrutiny and professional fallout. Mia ended up living in a small apartment across town, far from the life she had once boasted about. For a while, I worried about how the girls would cope without their mother. But as time passed, they began to adjust. Emily threw herself into her schoolwork and extracurricular activities, while Sophie leaned on me more than ever. We created new routines, new traditions, and slowly began to rebuild our lives. One evening, several months after the divorce was finalized, Mia called. Her voice was hollow, and I could tell she'd been drinking. "Alex," she said, "I know I don't deserve it, but can I see the girls? I miss them." I paused, my grip tightening on the phone. "They're doing fine, Mia. They've adjusted. I won't let you come back into their lives just to hurt them again. I'm their mother," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I made mistakes, but I love them." "You had a chance to prove that," I said, my tone cold. "You chose Henry. You chose yourself. Now, they deserve stability, and that's what I'm giving them." The call ended shortly after. I didn't feel satisfaction, only a lingering sadness for what could have been. Mia had thrown away not just our marriage, but her relationship with her children. And while part of me wanted to believe she could change, I couldn't take that risk. Life moved on. Emily and Sophie thrived in ways that surprised me. We became closer than ever, our little family of 3. I wasn't naive. I knew the scars from this experience would stay with us. But I also knew we were stronger than we had been before. The betrayal had left its mark, but it hadn't broken us. Goodbye.